Hello, our 10-minute break is coming to an end, so if council members would take their places, we'll resume the meeting. The next item on the agenda, non-action item, is a discussion on the domestic partnership, and the clerk would read the item.
B is a discussion of the domestic partnership registry and unlawful employment practices.
And that was proposed by Mr. Mad Speaker. I'll ask him to bring this up to date on that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As of last Monday, not yesterday, but let me get the date here. Monday the 5th, it passed both of these pieces of legislation passed the Human Relations Commission, which is obviously a committee of the city that's goal is to eradicate and educate against discrimination and stereotypes. It was within their committee, I think, for 3 separate meetings, and we really hashed over it and went over the details. I think some folks thought that I would be concerned that it stumbled in the committee. I think the committee process was great. We went through the things that were important to folks. We changed some things, and I think we walked away with a better piece of legislation than we walked in the room with. That being said, the reason why we're having the discussion this evening is to continue a sort of a vein of uber transparency, in that we've talked about it 3 times in the HRC committee. Councilman Schmidt asked if I would be opposed to having it this evening so we could discuss it this evening before it comes before the entire body next week. My hope and aim would be that council colleagues, if you have questions, now would be a great time to ask those questions. But then also if after the meeting you have questions for the city attorney or for myself, I'd be happy to try to answer those questions for you. But with that, I will turn it over to the city attorney, Mr. Sublett, to explain the 2 ordinances.
Okay, Mr. Sublett, I think the council members have copies of the 2 ordinances.
Yes, there should have been 2 copies in the packet that was handed out tonight. One is I believe it's a 7-page document that is a proposed ordinance on the domestic partnership registry. The second document is, I believe, a 3-page document dealing with affirmative action programs and unlawful employment acts. The legal department was asked to draft these 2 ordinances dealing with these 2 issues and attended 2 meetings of the HRC to get an idea of kind of what their thoughts were. And I think what I'll do is just go over the domestic partnership registry first. It was posted online last Thursday for the meeting next week because that's when action will be taken on it. Tonight is just the discussion item. So I'll give a brief overview of the 2 ordinances, ask any question or answer any questions anybody has, and if I don't have the answer, I will get it before next week. The domestic partnership registry ordinance would create a domestic partnership registry within the city of Topeka. Anybody that would qualify as a domestic partner within the city could then register on the domestic partnership registry. The definition of a domestic partner, which is lines 15 through 21, is essentially 2 individuals who are residents of the city of Topeka, who are 18 years of age, had the mental capacity to contract, and who live together in a relationship of indefinite duration with a mutual commitment in which the partners share the necessities of life and financial interdependence. They're not married to another person, do not have another domestic partner, and are not related by blood more closely than would bar their marriage in this state. One thing that you'll notice is a lot of times I think people have the assumption that the domestic partnership registry only applies to same-sex couples. That's not accurate. It could also be opposite-sex couples who aren't married but still meet that definition. Residency is 60 consecutive. If they're essentially living in Topeka for 60 days prior to filing the declaration, And then we go on to define that a little more. There's a present fixed residence within the city limits of Topeka where they intend to remain for an indefinite period of time and intend to return. Lines 29 through 46 on page 2, going to establish the criteria for establishing a domestic partnership. Again, residents of the city share a common permanent residence. They have a relationship of mutual interdependence. Both individuals contribute to the maintenance and support of the household. Neither party's married to a third individual, 18 years of age, mental capacity to contract, not related by blood in a way that would prevent them from being married, and they file a declaration of a domestic partnership with the city. One issue that comes up quite often in these situations is what do you do, removal, and how long do you have to wait if there is a domestic partnership that breaks up to re-register. Lines 54 through 58 kind of deal with that. No individual who has previously filed a declaration of domestic partnership in the city may file a new declaration of domestic partnership until at least 90 days after the date that a request for removal. And in terms of dissolution, if one of the partner dies, the domestic partnership is dissolved. There's a request for removal has been filed by one or both individuals. And in terms of how the process would be set up, how the system would be set up, the city manager would direct which city department would deal with the registration and how we're going to maintain that and what that process is going to be. And the clerk has already started looking at different cities. Our domestic partnership ordinance is based essentially on the one in Lawrence, which has not been challenged, and so that's why we kind of selected that as our model. To be clear, this doesn't create any legal rights. It doesn't create any additional responsibilities. All it is ability for two people who meet the definition to register on a domestic partnership registry. Now, why would somebody want to do that? If they work for a private entity that offers benefits to domestic partners, that would be a reason that this would be proof that they're in a domestic partnership. Sometimes there's issues with hospital visitation, that family members want to keep partners from visiting each other, and the hospital needs some sort of documentation that they are in a domestic partnership, so it can be used in that way as well. Financial costs in terms of the domestic partnership, what we're looking at is what would the staff time be? That's essentially the cost of the city to maintain it. And Lawrence, the cost is $75. Just to give you the cost of a marriage license in Shawnee County is $85.50. So we'd be looking at the staff time that it would take and make sure that we could cover our costs. And again, I've asked the clerk's office about that piece of it and starting to see how much time it would take. And Lawrence is essentially kept on a spreadsheet, so it's not maintaining it. It's not difficult. In terms of numbers, there are 81 different municipalities that have domestic partnership registries, because I know that's a question that we're often asked is what are other cities doing? There are cities here in Kansas, Lawrence, Colorado, Missouri, Arkansas, Iowa, lots of cities around us and around the state that have domestic partnership registries. This doesn't require anybody to provide any kind of benefits. And I want to just make that clear for everybody that this doesn't mandate that you provide anything. All it does is give somebody an opportunity to sign up on the registry. In Lawrence, they had 37 people sign up in the first year, and right now they have 68 people that have signed up, and they've had their domestic partnership registry since I think it was either 2007 or 2008.
Are those couples or total individuals?
What they gave me is 68 total people have signed up, So I think that would be the partner, but I could clarify to make
Okay.
sure. But and they've had 10 asked to be removed. So in terms of the numbers you're looking at, that's what you're
And when did
looking
that,
at.
how long has it been in effect?
Since either 2007 or 2008. And on page 6, sometimes the question gets up, what if somebody tries to register without the other person's permission? If you can, that would be a misdemeanor. If somebody attempted to register somebody else without their permission, that would be a misdemeanor offense. So I know I've given you a quick overview of that, and I would stand for any questions.
Yeah, why don't we see if there are any questions on that, on the domestic partnership registry. Okay, Mrs. Ortiz.
Thank you. You said this does not give any legal rights, is that correct?
Yes, yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
but then you turned around and said, but if they're in the hospital and the family member doesn't want them there, so what legal, still doesn't give them a legal right to get in to see them, is that correct?
No, it would be up to the hospital's policy. If they would have a policy that they would allow visitation for domestic partners, then if they're registered on this, they could show the hospital, look, I am this person's domestic partner.
Okay, do we know how many hospitals have that policy?
I checked on the visitation hospitals here in town, and I couldn't find what their policies were on domestic partners.
On both Stormont and Francis?
Yeah, I'm not saying they don't have one. I looked through their policies in terms of visitation, couldn't find one.
Okay. I had another question here. I'll come back.
Okay, if you
Your Honor,
come
thank
back,
you.
are there other questions or comments or discussion? Mrs. Hiller?
Well, I really appreciate the work that's gone into this. An ordinance like this was proposed a couple of years ago and was fairly well received. What are the differences since before?
I wasn't here when it drafted when the earlier domestic partnership registry was drafted. We drafted this off of the one that was done in Lawrence just because it's withstood the test of time. So I don't know. I couldn't tell you what the previous ordinance was and compared to this.
Yeah, I think aside from some language changes, there really isn't any difference between this and what was proposed by then Councilman
Great.
Gray. Thank you.
Okay.
You
Thank
have another question? We can come back. Okay, go ahead. Ms. Ortiz?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On line 65, it has the city manager or his or her designee shall determine a reasonable fee base, but we haven't determined that in here, is that correct?
No.
Where did you come up with the 75? You were just using that
No,
as an example, is that correct?
No, what I believe is that's what Lawrence charges for their registry. I was
So
just
you were
giving-
using that as an
yeah,
example?
Right.
Okay. I had something else, Mr. Mayor, but I'll need to thumb through this.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right,
Thank you.
jump to it. Is there other questions? Shall
Well,
we?
I guess, if I may,
ahead.
I guess my other question would be, so we haven't set anything in here, just saying that the city manager would, or his designee would think of that reasonable fee.
Yeah, the city manager, I'm sure we'd work with the clerk's office to determine how much staff time it would take.
But we
once-
don't know.
We don't know that tonight.
Okay.
No, we don't.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Then we will proceed to the affirmative action policy of the other ordinance.
And this one applies, just to be clear, only to city employees. This does not apply to private businesses. This is just to city employees. And this is our affirmative action program within the city. And then page 2 gets into unlawful employment practices. There are a few changes in the definition section on lines 19. We include sexual orientation and gender identity as categories of people that we're going to treat employees equally without regard to race, religion, creed, color, sex, sexual orientation, or gender identity, disability, national origin. which is unrelated to the ability to perform a particular job or occupation. So essentially, again, just adding sexual orientation, gender identity. Then in lines 22 through 25, we define gender identity as means the persistent sense of one's gender-related identity, appearance, behavior, and other characteristics of an individual as perceived by the individual or another, and without regard to the individual's actual or assigned sex at birth. So this has nothing to do with sex at birth. It's how that individual perceives themselves. Next, in lines 26 and 27, we define sexual orientation means perceived or actual heterosexuality, homosexuality, or bisexuality. Our definition for gender identity, we looked at probably 52 different municipalities, and again, this is the definition that has been used in Lawrence and several other cities in terms of gender identity. Lines 28 through 31, a good faith effort to treat employees equally without regard to sexual orientation will include an effort to contract for health coverage for domestic partners registered on the city's domestic partnership registry and any children or such registered domestic partners. Again, this isn't mandating the city to provide coverage, it's to make a good faith effort to contract for health coverage. And then line 37, under unlawful employment practices, just adds gender identity in addition to sexual orientation. And, one second. In terms of just some other cities, because I know that's always a question asked, how many municipalities protect gender identity? What I found from the National Human Rights Coalition is about 190. How many protect sexual orientation? About 160. And then one thing that we've done is this ordinance wouldn't go into effect if it was passed until January 1st of 2015 because our current contract with Blue Cross Blue Shield does not provide for domestic partner benefits. So we wanted you to be able to go through the budget process. We have an RFP out currently, and so we could look at would there be an increased cost, because the answer to that question right now is we don't know if there would be an increased cost, but that's why it wouldn't require the city to provide that health coverage. It would just require the city to make a good faith effort to look at coverage. So, and again, going back to the domestic partner registry in Lawrence, according to the clerk in Lawrence, she didn't believe they had any city employees that had signed up on the domestic partnership registry. That
I'm sorry, they had or had not?
They didn't have any city employees, she believed, but you know, I'm not saying that's a predictor of the city of Topeka. That's the one registry we have here in Kansas, and I wanted to be able to provide that information for you. So with that, I would stand for questions on this proposed ordinance.
Are there questions for Mr. Sublett and Mr. Manspeaker?
Just to clarify, if one thing that we sort of realized is going through this process, the argument had we'd gone around and around about the same-sex benefits or partner benefits, and the reality is that it would appear that our current employment practices already allow for someone to pursue those benefits. Because if we were to violate the unlawful employment practices, if someone was in a relationship and asked for benefits for their partner, they may have a pretty strong case to be able to get them as we stand right now.
This is how I'd like to respond to that. Sexual orientation is already included in our unlawful employment practices. Somebody could make an argument that it would be a violation of their terms and conditions of employment if we didn't offer their partner benefits. I think that's as far as I would like to go on that issue, but it's an argument somebody could make. And we do, just to be clear, on page 2, line 37, we already include sexual orientation as a protected class. We're just adding gender identity.
Thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Sublett, Mrs. Ortiz?
Yes, on line 19, do we currently have a issue with sexual orientation and gender identity with the city?
What do you mean by an issue?
That they're filing a lot of suits? Is this the issue? Is that,
Well, they wouldn't have the right to file, they're not, at this time, they're not a protected class, so they wouldn't have a right to file a suit against the city for that violation because they're not a protected class on the city level or the state level, so
would this make them a protected class?
it would protect them from it would protect them from discrimination, yes.
So it's not an HR issue right now, would you say that? There's none? Okay, because I do know that we do have some gay and lesbian people that work for the city, and I've never heard of any issues that they've had, and that's why I asked that question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Madam Speaker?
The gay and lesbian members of our city staff are already protected by the current law. This would only be adding in the gender identity specification to expand it. Thank you.
Mrs. Hiller?
Question about the line 28 and then the health insurance. I mean, we're self-insured. So if we want to do it, what's the problem? I mean, what would get in the way?
We have a third-party administrator of our insurance plan, which is Blue Cross Blue Shield. And in terms of administering that plan, our current contract doesn't administer the plan regarding domestic partners. So even though we're self-insured, we still have a contract with a third-party insurance company to administer our plan. We don't process the claims ourselves. It's Blue Cross Blue Shield that deals with that. And I think Jackie could also speak to that as well. Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Jackie, do you want to add, is there something you want to add to that?
The only thing that I would add is in that contract defines eligible dependents, and that would just have to be modified in future contracts to include domestic partners.
That's our contract with our provider. Okay. Are there other questions? Seeing none, then we will go to the public comment. And we have 7 persons who have signed up to discuss. Actually, they're put together so they could be discussing either of the ordinances. And if you have not spoken before, you have a 4-minute time limit. At the end of 3 minutes, the white light goes on, and therefore you would generally bring your comments to a conclusion. When the red light comes on, then your time has expired. Our first speaker is Bill Lucero, to be followed by Amy Cohen. And we always say that so that they can be close by so that we can move right along through them all. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I am Bill Lucero, speaking in favor of the proposed domestic partnership registry and fair employment ordinances. And as Mr. Sublette said, this is not an exclusive issue to the gay lesbian community, but certainly it's of interest to that community, and because of that, I anticipate considerable opposition may be spoken as well. And I wanted to simply make an affirmation prior to that time. During the past 44 years, I've been a citizen here in Topeka. I've witnessed no better example of progressive, enlightened human rights promotion than what has occurred in these chambers during the past year. The New York City LGBT community designated the June 28, 1969 Stonewall riot as the pivotal point in pursuing justice and standing for LGBT rights and respect in New York. Topeka has its own date when concerned citizens stood together in solidarity against bigotry and hatred. That was on December 5th, 1977, when Anita Bryant spoke in this same auditorium, brandishing her homophobic diatribe. Members of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Topeka and the Washburn University Campus Ministry joined forces with the gay lesbian community in Topeka to bring Minnesota State Senator Alan Spears to speak out in favor of gay lesbian rights. At the time, Spears was the only out-of-the-closet homosexual in a state or national office. He didn't even have to wait until the 7th round to be drafted by us to speak. Both the Spears and Bryant presentations received equal treatment in the Topeka media and provided the start of a slowly developing dialogue related to equal treatment and protection under the law. 36 years passed until this council took the first symbolic step of recognizing the need for these rights, but it's been time well invested, and I thank you. That event may have been the first organized cooperative participation between the gay and straight communities of Topeka being together as an open affirmation that all persons should have similar rights without prejudice. And that brings us to the same reason we in the straight persuasion join with our gay sisters and brothers this evening. The proposed ordinances before you probably will provide some stressful soul searching in coming to the correct vote for each of you council members next week. I recently reviewed my notes on successful stress reduction that I delivered to my psychology class at Washburn University when I had the privilege of teaching one of you during the 1970s. And I consider that piece of advice still relevant today. Stress is unlikely to be reduced by assuming a belief in one's self-righteousness. Rather, it is overcome by embracing genuine consideration and kindness while practicing absolute compassion. Please pass these two important ordinances. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Musclaro. Next is Amy Cohen, to be followed by Mary Akerstrom.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Amy Cohen, and I'm urging you to pass these ordinances. Topeka, unfortunately, has been known as a city of hate internationally, and this is an opportunity before all of you to change that message, and I urge you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Akerstrom, to be followed by Pedro Igonagaray.
I'd like to thank you all for staying so late and getting to this issue. I'd especially like to thank Mr. Manspeaker and the Human Relations Commission for bringing this proposal to the City Council. My partner and I share a home, and we're raising 2 children. We have life insurance and health insurance and homeowners insurance. And what does it matter that we actually happen to be a heterosexual couple? Now activist Allison Weiss explains that marriage, defined as one man and one woman, systematically denies benefits to same-sex couples that it provides to heterosexual couples, even if that heterosexual couple met 5 minutes ago in Las Vegas. I say if a couple are loving, kind, and of a monogamous mind, then it is ridiculous to restrict any benefits or recognition based on their sexual orientation. Because marriage is a partnership. As my partner and I share our joys and sorrows, we also share our medical and dental plan. As we share time with our children, we also share our tax returns. Healthcare workers, educators, and other public service providers do not question the status of our family dynamic simply because it's deemed traditional. The necessity of shared personal information does not diminish when a family is built by same-sex couples. In addition to recognizing all loving families, a domestic partnership registry could also offer a potential trial marriage for maybe some younger hetero couples that find themselves in the family way, as is bound to happen. But there are also young couples who would like to know what marriage really is about, and a domestic partnership registry could provide that time period for them to try out what it's like to live together. Gerald Nadler of New York stated that no legitimate interest in the welfare of children is ever advanced by withholding protection from some children based on a desire to express moral disapproval of their parents. Chris Coons of Delaware has stated that faith does not grant a monopoly on the interpretation and the will of God. It is simply love and logic to recognize any and all loving, committed relationships. 13 states and DC have passed the Respective Marriage Act, and as was mentioned earlier, 81 municipalities have a domestic partnership registry. The federal government recognizes same-sex marriage. Let our city join others in Kansas to continue civil rights and equality for all of our citizens. When the people of our capital city do pass these ordinances to recognize domestic partnerships and include all public employees in protection from discrimination, it's a clear unified rebuttal to fundamentalists that have dominated the recent state legislature. Some folks in Topeka have given our fair city a bad rep, and it's time to break the chains of bigoted fanatics. Some Democrats may be as diehard as Republicans in their religious beliefs, but our city has maintained an independently elected council, and I continue to support independent acts from our elected officials. I applaud all faithful humans willing to stand up on the side of love, and I'm so proud of the city, again, for addressing this issue. Next week, when you vote on this issue, these ordinances, is my wedding anniversary. So please vote yes.
Thank you. Next is Pedro Irgona-Garay, to be followed by Patricia Gross.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, staff. Mr. Madam Speaker, I want to thank you for your leadership, ongoing leadership on this issue. I began as a straight man efforts to provide equal protection to gay, lesbian, and transgender people when I was in law school with a distinguished lawyer from New York in federal court when the University of Kansas was denying gay and lesbian students the right to be treated equally. Bill Kunstler and I were thrown out of our local federal court by a judge proclaiming that we needed to leave his courtroom. Since those early days, I've been involved in this battle because gay, lesbian, and transgender people are my parents, my sisters, my brothers, my family. They are us. As I look at Stephanie Mott, my hero, this lady was named Kansas Woman of the Year by the University of Kansas, an honor shared by my good friend Kathleen Sebelius, Amelia Earhart, and yet she's treated unequally for no other reason than at birth she was born with male genitalia, when in fact she is a biological woman. I urge you to put aside those issues that may deny you equal treatment of others. I urge you to take a step forward in making our community what it can be, what it should be. We're celebrating Brown versus Board of Education. What a great legacy for our city. It is time we put away the hatred, the bigotry, the ignorance. For yes, bigotry wrapped in prayer is still bigotry. Martin Luther King, his main assistant was a gay man. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People supports these ordinances. Every major civil rights organization in this country supports it. While in other parts of the world, gay and lesbian people can be imprisoned and at times be even put to death. Let's put the ugly history that we have seen in the recent past behind. Let's take a step forward to be proud of what our community can and should be. Let's embrace the differences amongst us, and let's do everything we can to love one another, to treat one another with equal dignity, with respect. It wouldn't take far in each of our families to find a gay, lesbian, or transgender person. They are us, we are them. Please pass these ordinances, move our city forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Patricia Gross, followed by Davis Hammett.
Here I am again. I was here last year when we talked about this, and I wrote this down because I'm not a very good speaker. But what I started out was I'm going to say good evening to all my equals. I am a lesbian. I am retired, and I'm not in a relationship. What these two things that we're talking about now, the ordinances, these two equal rights discrimination ordinances, once again affects a lot of my friends who still work for the city of Topeka and do pay taxes on their homes, food, vehicles, just like the rest of you do. Why shouldn't there be a domestic registry? That's your question. The other ordinance deals with discrimination toward gender identity for protection from abuse and hate and plain old ignorance. Why shouldn't the LGBT personnel be treated the same as you all? I'm assuming that your spouses have coverage under your insurance policies. That's assuming, you know what that does to you. Again, why not have same-sex partners have the same coverage? Give the city manager the power to contract for health benefits for the same-sex partners. Common law partnerships used to be covered under some insurances because I used to work for a company. Just because they may be the opposite sex, does that make it okay for them and not same-sex couples? I may not have a degree in anything but just living life. But I still see these issues all wrapped up in not giving LGBT people the same equal rights as the rest of everybody else who lives and works for the city of Topeka and the rest of the United States. Now, I'm going to make a little joke here, but it's a serious joke. So if I offend you, sorry. I get offended because of what you all do to the LGBT, not you all, what the world does to the LGBT. If you don't like the LGBT people, blame the straight people. They are the ones who keep having the LGBT babies. Thanks for listening to one of your equals. I'll pass.
Thank you for your comments. Davis Hammett, to be followed by Stephanie Mott.
Mayor, City Council, thank you for letting me speak. My name is Davis Hammett. I'm a humanitarian activist, and I'm also the Director of Operations for Planning Peace. Topeka is not currently an equal opportunity employer. We lack the protection for gender identity here, meaning you can be fired for being transgender. That is discrimination. Same-sex couples do not receive the same benefits as their opposite-sex colleagues. That is discrimination. These proposed ordinances give the city of Topeka the opportunity to begin correcting such injustice. To begin the process of creating a city that works for everyone, not just for cisgendered heterosexual individuals. Next week, you have the opportunity to vote to further the dream that individuals be judged solely by the content of their character. Your votes are not merely for these city ordinances. Your votes are powerful symbols for the LGBTQ community. They can be symbols of hope, but they can also be no votes that are symbols of despair. Your votes speak volumes. You have the opportunity to tell the struggling transgender teen that they are worthy, that they are equal here in this city. I know many Topekans who are in same-sex relationships and are legally married in other states. Yet the city of Topeka says, we don't know your love here, you're not recognized. That's not only wrong, it's legally problematic. The proposed ordinances are not only moral, they are inevitable. They are practical. Same-sex marriage will eventually pass here in Kansas, and the city of Topeka has the opportunity to be ahead of the curve. Farther, it means the city employment will be accessible to more individuals, to all individuals. This will increase our odds of having competent employees. These measures give you the chance to fulfill the pledge that you make to the flag, to march towards one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephanie Mott.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council members. Thank you, Councilman Manspeaker, for your efforts and for vetting this through the Human Relations Commission. And thank you, Mr. City Attorney, for all the work that you've done on this and everybody who's been involved in that. Wow, I'm not sure where to start. I guess maybe I'll start with talking about the Domestic Partnership Registry and what happens sometimes in hospitals. As a matter of fact, because of some changes that came down from the federal government, it's against the law for any hospital that receives any federal money to discriminate against people based on sexual orientation. The problem is they don't always know that there's a same-sex relationship. I have a friend who went to visit her partner's family out of state, and her partner became ill, and she got put into the hospital, and she became unable to discuss her own care. That woman's family denied the existence of the relationship, said that relationship does not exist. She is not telling you the truth. And my friend had no means by which to say, but I have some documentation here that shows that I am in a relationship. I don't know if you can imagine having your loved one being in the hospital and being told that you can't even see them. I don't know if you can imagine having your loved one in the hospital and not being able to participate in the decisions that might make a difference between whether or not they live and die. Or having your loved one in the hospital knowing that they're gonna die and you don't even have a chance to say goodbye. You know, it doesn't happen often. Our hospitals don't set out to discriminate against people who are gay or lesbian or transgender. But if they don't know that there's a relationship there and they're put in a position where this person is not capable of responding, and the person's blood family says that relationship doesn't exist, the person who's been in this long-term, loving, committed, life-sharing relationship has no recourse. They cannot prove that that relationship exists. That's what this domestic partnership does, the registry does. That's what it changes, that's why it's so important. But there's something else that this does. It says that your love is the same as my love. It says that I am not a lesser human being because I'm gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgender. It says that you should have the same opportunities and the same rights and responsibilities that I have, you know? And then another thing I want to make sure I say here is that I spent some time, you know, trying to get some people to come in and speak tonight. I did the same thing when we talked about the changing the scope of the HRC. I had several people tell me they were afraid to come here and stand up for heterosexual people. Were afraid to come here and speak in favor of LGBT equality because they were afraid they'd lose their job. And I'm talking about people who work for an organization that has protections for them. And they're still afraid to even come here and say out loud in public that they support equality for lesbian, gay, bi, and transgender people. And then finally, real quickly, I just, you know, I'm 56 years old. I've lived my entire life being treated as though I were a second-class citizen.
Okay,
And
your time is
please
expired.
change. Please vote to approve these ordinances.
Would you like me to
Thank
extend?
you.
No,
You're good?
I would stand for questions if somebody has some.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you. Council members, is there other discussion on this item? Seeing none, then that completes that discussion item, and we move on to item C under non-action items, and that has to do with the budget priorities, and that we'll have the Deputy Mayor speak to them.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to put this on for discussion tonight so that
we could be out ahead of the other budget meetings that are coming up at the end of the month. And also, under our charter ordinance, by the third Tuesday in May, if the council wants to adopt budget priorities, that's the suggested time frame. So I'm trying to stay in the, I guess, timeliness. Sometimes I think the councils have adopted these resolutions, and I think you were provided a copy from 2012 and I think 2011 as far as when they were adopted. One spoke to the 2013 budget, and the other one spoke to the 2012 budget process. So those were just provided as examples. You note that one is brief with sort of overall topics that were priorities, and the other one gave more detail. So I think it's really up to this council to decide which way they want to go, whether they want to discuss what's been done in the past or come up with new ideas. But I wanted to put it on the table so that we could hopefully give some ideas to staff and have a resolution ready for next week. But I would like to, if that's all right, Mr. Mayor, pass this over to the city manager, who I think was going to also speak to this issue.
Okay, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So we have in discussions on the budget and with council members in written conversations and just our general conversation identified 4 priorities that we would recommend for consideration and discussion. The first would be to, I'm sorry.
Thank you. To establish fiscal sustainability by building the general fund balance. Generally, when we've talked about that, we talk about in terms of increasing the general fund balance by 1% a year as part of our long-term economic strategy, specifically pertaining to the financial health of the community, but also to return ourselves to achieving the high bond rating that we seek. The second objective would be to invest in infrastructure. The third would be to continue a commitment to public safety. And the fourth would be, and I'll change the wording for what I have here, a continued commitment to developing neighborhoods. Just in summary, increase general fund balance, invest in infrastructure, continue commitment to public safety, and continue commitment to developing neighborhoods.
Okay. Would you say, are those ranked in importance? Not to put you on the spot, but
no, I would say that in this particular list, I would have a difficult time prioritizing any of them.
Okay, all right, 4 priorities. So then, actually, we could have those presented next week from the deputy mayor, and actually then the council could vote and or discuss and or make changes. That's the way to go of handling this. All right, Mrs. Heller?
Just a question of the city manager, if I could. Could you refresh then, when you talk about, I really did like the one from 2013, which says public safety, infrastructure, and building neighborhoods. When you talk about building the general fund balance to that, we made a substantial amount of progress toward at least our minimum, our preferred threshold. Is that correct?
Mayor and Councilmember Hiller, we made significant progress towards our goal. We had, and this has not been officially adopted, this is just really what's been driving our conversation, is we're really seeking to get to 15% of a fund balance. The average for the state of Kansas, if I remember this correctly, is like 18%. 10% is the national average, but we are compared to our fellow Kansas cities. The real goal here is financial sustainability, and that's just a measurement tool that we've used.
So how much would you be thinking that you wanted to, maybe in dollars, if we adopted that, how much would you be thinking about adding to our fund balance just in 2015?
It's kind of late, I forgot what our budget was, no. No, roughly speaking, we're probably looking at roughly $1.5 million in addition to the fund balance, going forward. But that's a premature conversation. I think we need to have the complete budget conversation before we can jump to the final chapter. The idea is as we structure the overall budget of the city, we would like to see us continuing to spend less than we take in, and continuing to establish the financial strength of the city, adding to that fund balance 1% over the previous year.
And maybe when we do this next week, when it isn't quite at this same hour, we can talk some more about this and about some background, because I think it's good to have the discussion on this and any of the other issues. Other comments?
So you don't want to talk about it tonight?
I think it'd be easier, I would prefer to wait till next week.
Okay.
And I think our agenda is going to be less next week also. The length certainly will be. Any other discussion? Not that I don't mean to be cut it off. This is Deputy Mayor. Why don't you bring this together?
Well, I don't want anybody to feel like they don't have the opportunity to discuss it tonight. I think it would be nice if this is the suggestions that were made by the city manager. That's sort of the process, just so everyone knows that we do get some suggestions made by the city manager, and then it's still our responsibility to adopt the budget priorities. So I don't want anybody to feel they can't. These four. I mean, I don't find anything wrong with thinking we should be fiscally responsible, so establishing fiscal sustainability sounds like probably a good budget priority, and then the others are very similar to what we've had in the past. So you know, they make sense to me, but I want everyone to feel comfortable with being able to express whether they want to see this in a resolution next week or don't. I mean, if there's something you want to add to it, or you want one of these taken out, now would be the time, I think, to express that.
And I agree. I meant going into a great deal of detail on that particular issue of how much we say should be our ending fund balance. That particular, there's a lot involved with that, and I have thoughts about it also.
Well, my only point was that we're just now starting out of a recession. As much as possible, we want to build those fund balances. At the same time, we don't want to be borrowing money when we could spend cash, and we're trying to get out. So those other three priorities are more important to me than building the fund balance substantially at this juncture. I'd like to see us progressively do it, but it's not my top priority out of the list at this point. That was all I wanted to say.
All right, thank you. Mr. Colson.
And thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Hiller. Absolutely. The goal is financial sustainability. The goal is effective management of our overall budget. Because we got dinged specifically on the fund reserve, that's why it became a target, and it is a easy performance metric of whether you spent less than you had available to you, and build up the long-term reserve. So certainly I share the opinion that my job is to recommend, your job is to direct me.
Okay. Mrs. Elislan.
Just a quick comment. One of the things that I would consider important, not so much about building the general fund, but to be looking at strategies for good, sound economic management of our funds, is that one of the issues that you yourself say that is very important to you is the bonds. Our bonds are proportionally affected by the pool that we have in our general fund. So at the same time that we're trying to save money for the city and ensure that we're able to operate in a better way, I think this is something for us to keep in consideration. Not saying that it's a priority, but it's something that I want to earmark that is important for us to consider.
Other comments? Mr. Schmidt?
I would just like to introduce a motion to extend the meeting since we're nearing the 10 o'clock hour, which would automatically end the meeting.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to extend this meeting past 10 o'clock. A discussion, I don't know if that's discussable or not. All those in favor vote yes, opposed vote no.
We have 8 yes.
8 having voted yes, for members of the audience, we have a rules and procedures that meetings must end by 10 o'clock unless we take action to extend them, which we just did. So we are now still discussing budget priorities.
Your Honor.
Yes, Mr. Harmon.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would certainly support the budget priorities as articulated by the city manager and ask that a resolution be brought forth for consideration next week along those lines. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there other discussion? Seeing none, we will conclude that item of the agenda. The next item is announcements, and the first part of that is the clerk will provide an overview of next week's agenda.
The May 20th, 2014 agenda, we have 10 items under the consent agenda, 2 board appointments for the Board of Building and Fire Appeals, 2 board appointments for the Board of Plumbing Examiners, 2 board appointments for the Topeka Human Relations Commission, and 1 board appointment for the Board of Mechanical Examiners, a resolution for the Juneteenth 2014 celebration, and of course minutes and any applications. For action items, we have 6 items. 1 is the resolution for the 2015 through 2019 Capital Improvement Program and 2015 through 2017 Capital Improvement Budget. We have a resolution for the issue of revenue bonds for enterprise-funded projects, an ordinance for domestic partnership registry, another ordinance for unlawful employment practices, and the expenditure ordinance for March 29th through April 25th, and then any other applications we may have then.
All right, thank you. And we'll go to other announcements. Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, I have none. Thank you.
Thank you. We start with Mrs. Schwartz.
Thank you, Your Honor. First, I want to congratulate all the graduates this coming week. I wished I could be here Friday to hear the First Lady. I think that's such an honor. But I will be attending my granddaughter's graduation from college in Fort Scott. Also, congrats to our Small Business Award winners that were honored today. And today I spent 3 hours with Brendan Wiley at the zoo and former Chief Justice McFarland and Maureen Cummings, who was on the front page of the paper yesterday. And Brendan, he was phenomenal at showing us things that had been done. And we do have a world-class zoo. So I want to thank him for that. And then also thanks to our Public Works Director, Doug Whitaker, and Kelly Holler for being at attending a problem that we had in my district, and they were there firsthand. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Schmidt.
Thank you. I'll keep it brief. There are a whole bunch of events surrounding the 60th anniversary of the Brown v. Board decision this weekend, from barbecues to the First Lady stopping by. So please get out and investigate them and enjoy them. They are pretty much all listed on either the Visit Topeka website. I believe the City of Topeka site has a link to it. And enjoy. Thank you.
And I want to acknowledge the role that Councilman Schmidt has played in the activities leading up to this weekend. It's been a major part of the planning part. Councilman Harmon, Councilwoman Hiller.
Just wanted to echo the comments about the small businesses. I had a chance to be there, and it was just incredible. It was a sold-out crowd. Every nominated business was phenomenal. It was really quite an experience. I think I've been every year for the last 5. Just to pitch in on the 60th once more, there is a gospel fest on Thursday night, so people can look for that if they're going out of town for the weekend. There are legacy walks from Monroe to Sumner on Saturday, one at 10 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. Those will be ranger-led walks and should be fascinating. And then the barbecue fest on Sunday afternoon is at Sumner. Blues and barbecue, free and open to the public. Thank you.
Mrs. Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I want to thank you for inviting the children from Quincy. You know, I always say that if our kids do something bad, they're in the paper. So just to recognize them for a positive vendor is very, very awesome. So I just wanted to thank you. Secondly, I wanted to say that I have a few, so if you'll bear with me. The Topeka Metro is offering for our youth, kids 18 and under, from May 15th to August 15th, they can ride the Metro free, and I think that's awesome. They can go to the zoo, Discovery Center, the library, wherever they need to go. And I'm going to keep pointing out that the Metro is thinking outside the box, but they're not charging, so they're not making any money there, but that's awesome. Second, I'd like to talk about the makeover takeover, and I hope I get the right dates correct. For Central Park, everything west of Topeka Boulevard, it's May 17th, Saturday, May 17th. Drag it to the curb. Let's get rid of that stuff and keep our city clean. And then also for everything east, it's May the 24th. And I wanted to announce that. Second, I wanted to announce that even though District 2 is vacant, I would be willing to take on that challenge to the citizens that would like to call, that have any issues, to feel free to call me. When I was elected, I think I was elected to serve district, or represent District 3, but I was also elected, and I feel in my heart to serve the whole city. So I will take on that challenge. I don't know if many of my colleagues want to, but I will add that to my plate. Having said all that, Oakland Pool opens May the 24th, and I think that's awesome. Give our kids something to do. The spray park is open, and the Samuel Abbott Samuel Abbott Park over on 10th Street. And let's see, I just also wanted to congratulate all the graduates from 501 on Saturday, and ask them to be safe and think about what they're doing. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Briefly, I guess a reminder, I think we have JADO meeting tomorrow night at 6 o'clock here in the chamber, so if anyone wants to attend that. So.
Okay. Mrs. Delisla.
First of all, I wanted to acknowledge everybody that spoke up today with regards to the registry. One of the things that really struck with me was the comment that Ms. Mott said with regards to people feeling concerned and afraid of speaking up for what they believe in. And I want to encourage everybody that's looking across the waves, and that will see this later, that Topeka is a city in which your thoughts, your views, and your feelings are going to be respected. You should never feel afraid of expressing who you are, what you believe. We are a city of tolerance, we're a city of respect, we're a city of love. And I just want to make sure that that gets across. Thank you, all of you that spoke up today. Thank you, Mr. Man Speaker, for your arduous work. And secondly, I wanted to thank publicly my colleagues in the Economic and the Community Development Committee. We had a grueling 2-hour meeting yesterday, and we started the initial allocation for the contracted services. The meeting was fabulous. It just shows the level of professionalism that we have in our city at this moment, and I'm looking forward to the next 2 meetings. Tomorrow is going to be the next one at 12:30, if you're interested in seeing what the grant funds are going to be doing. Thank you.
Mr. Man Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to kind of go backwards to something we all talked about last week, because I think a night or two after the council meeting, I started thinking about this, and it's the 3 tigers that were born to the zoo. I think we may have missed the mark on the advertising here. Sumatran tigers, which are the breed that we have at the City of Topeka Zoo, are extremely rare. And when I say extremely, only 1,000 or less than 1,000 are known to exist in the world today. Less than 400 exist in the wild. In terms of their conservation status, the tigers are critically endangered, which is basically 2 steps above extinct. Other chains of tigers that have come from the strain of Sumatran tigers, the Bali tiger and the Javan tiger, have already become extinct. So it's a really, to me, as someone who doesn't mind paying taxes when services and government is good and provides us the things that we need to live on a day-to-day basis, it's something really amazing to know that our tax dollars in the city of Topeka helped further a species. And that's really saying something in terms of a community coming together and building something like a zoo and being able to protect something that may not be on this earth for much longer. So kudos to our zoo. I hope they keep up the good work. I know they will. And thanks everybody who stood up this evening and spoke in favor of the ordinance. I look forward to next week. Thank you.
Thank you. We have two persons who signed up for public comment. First is Ted Mize.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. We have not seen each other this spring, and I hope your lives have been as happy as mine. I have three subjects I would like to bring up tonight. First, when you look at the beautiful trees in central Topeka, you see them decorated with white or colored bags, which were designed to bring items home from the stores. I'm not asking that these plastic bags be outlawed here in Topeka, as some cities have done. It would be nice if you as spokesman would suggest to businessmen that they help us. Second, the spring weather has not been helpful in our fire plug painting program. We have painted a few. Wet grass and wind impede our progress, but we were hoping for a good season. Third, Veterans Day is coming up, and we all need to remember that we still have young men halfway around the world with their lives on the line. One way is to bring our young people to visit the Free Holly Museum of Military History in the East 6th Street Ramada downtown. We tell the story in models and scenes of the many times in history that our young men put on the uniform to serve their country. I hope that if you've never have visited us, you find it time to do so. We have 5 rooms of military history. Thank you an awful lot for your time and your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Mize. The second person is Joseph Ledbetter. I don't believe he is here. So that completes our public comment. Then we will have an executive session, if you want to set the parameters for that, the legal staff.
I would just ask for, ask for a motion to go into executive session to discuss potential litigation for approximately 15 minutes with the city manager, elected officials, myself, and the chief of police.
So moved.
Second.
And moved and seconded to go to executive session for approximately 15 minutes on those conditions. All those in favor vote yes, opposed vote no.
Man speaker first and Department second.
We do. Okay, we will go into executive session when the room is cleared.
No.
We're gonna excuse everybody.
Jennifer, to go?
Yeah, she can go. Yeah, we're done. Okay.